Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to walk you through the full painting process of this ocean scene. I painted this with oils, but you can follow along whether you have oil or acrylics. Techniques used for acrylic painting are pretty much the same as with oil painting. It's really stormy outside, which is the perfect weather for painting for me. First I'll walk you through how to mix all the colours, and then we'll get down to the painting. I'm using all my regular supplies here, so I'm interchanging a few different soft brushes, and I'm using a limited palette. But I've put the full supplies list on the blog, which I'll put a link to in the description, along with the written tutorial and the reference image. The colours on my palette are ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, lemon yellow, burnt umber and titanium white. I'm starting by mixing the sea colours first. The sea in this painting is a deep ultramarine blue, mixed with a little burnt umber to neutralise it. The darkest shade on my palette is ultramarine and burnt umber. In equal proportions, this will make a deep black colour, but I'm using a higher quantity of ultramarine compared to the burnt umber. It's roughly 3 parts ultramarine to 1 part burnt umber. It helps to mix a large quantity of this colour so we can use it to mix some of the midtones, and we'll also use it in the first layer of the painting. We can mix the midtones in this painting from this deep blue colour, add more titanium white to increase the brightness, or add some more ultramarine to increase the saturation. Create a new mix for the lightest tones. This mix is about 5 parts titanium white, 1 part ultramarine and a tiny dot of burnt umber. I wanted the sky colours to be a pastel gradient of blue with a yellow tone near the horizon, ranging to a primary blue near the top of the canvas. I'm going to give the impression of a yellow glow to represent the time of day just after sunrise. For the gradient of the sky colour right at the top, I've used a large dollop of titanium white with a dot of ultramarine and phthalo blue. For the yellow glow near the horizon, take the light primary sky colour, add a little extra white and a dot of lemon yellow. On your palette it will look green in tone, but in contrast to the darker sky blue will apply to the top of the canvas, the yellow tone will pop. We'll also paint a fluffy cloud which is darker than the rest of the sky colours. For this, I just mixed a small amount of the mid-tone sea colour with a yellow tone sky mix. You don't have to be too precise with mixing, and by using the colours you already mixed on your palette to create new mixes, you'll create really harmonious tones. There are 4 main steps to create this painting. First we'll block in the darkest areas, then we'll paint the mid-tones, then adjust the values of the mid-tones to create form, and then finally we'll add the highlights. Firstly, I'm going to block in the darkest shapes of the painting as reference points. I'm using my dark mix of ultramarine and burnt umber. Both of these pigments are transparent, and because I've thinned the paint with solvent, there's also increased the transparency. For this reason, the mixture doesn't look as dark as if I was painting straight, because the panel is backlighting the mix. That's okay because we're going to paint over this. I've thinned the paint with oil spike lavender, which dries relatively quickly. Oil-rich layers can be built on top of this. If you want to add solvent to your paint mix for the first blocked-in layer, turpentine or odourless mineral spirits would work really well too. These dark areas form the ripples in the water. The top of the ripples are catching the light, so I'll leave them until I come to paint the highlights. The ripples stretch across the panel in broad peaks and troughs. The top part and middle part of the water slants down to the left, and the bottom section of the water slants down to the right. The darkest area is near the top and the middle, whereas the bottom part of the water, the darker and lighter tones are closer in value. You don't have to consciously think of how these elements interact when painting. You can analyse the reference, which I'll put on the website, and recreate the formation of the water highlights and shadows for yourself. A wider brush with stiffer bristles is the perfect tool for this stage of the painting. I'm using a filbert brush as it has round edges. Most of the ripple shapes are round and there's no real sharp or flat edges in this painting, so I've chosen the filbert brush to create the broad shapes as I find it's creating the form of the painting quite efficiently. Another way that a thicker brush will help you out is that by applying more pressure it will create a wide line. There's a lot of variation in the thickness of the ripples. Of course, you can use whatever you have and artists will find that different tools will work for them. You definitely don't need anything too specific to enjoy painting seascapes like this. The light source in this painting is coming from around here. The shadows are being cast in this direction, so we'll use this knowledge to inform how we paint our darker midtones. We know that it's going to be darker in these areas where the ripples are blocking the light. Over the top of the darker areas I've blocked in, I'm establishing the midtones. There's a fair amount of contrast here between the dark and the light tones, and the edges look sharper than they should be. In the next stage, I'll use a colour darker than this midtone to blend out all the darker areas. The reason why I'm painting the lighter midtones first is because the lightest tones take up the largest area of this wave. To create a smoother blend between the darkest and lightest tones, take a transitional shade and apply it in areas where the two colours meet so that they mix into each other and appear softer. Take a clean soft brush and blend the colours out very lightly as you go along. That's what gives the painting a soft, realistic look. You can go in and increase the contrast of the darkest sections if you need to at this stage by painting over the shadows with your darkest mix. The brightest highlights are on the top areas of the water here. I'm painting with the lightest colour and a small rigger brush. You could use a round brush or even the edge of a flat brush if you don't have a rigger. Highlights sit right on top of the waves and blend into the midtones. To make it look realistic, make sure there's a gradation between the darkest shadow and the lighter shade. This is what gives each ripple the appearance of volume. It's the next morning, which is why the lights changed in the studio. The days are getting pretty short here, which makes it a bit of a challenge for painting because there's a lot less natural light. I definitely need to get some proper studio lights set up. The paint has dried a little bit, which is why these highlights look sharper, but it doesn't matter because I'll smooth it out with a transitional shade. While the wet on wet technique is perfect for seascape painting because you can blend the tones in the water, it's also possible to get a smooth appearance painting wet on dry by mixing transitional shades. I'm adding in highlight details and altering the contrast of different sections of the ripples on the water with my smallest brush. You can spend as much time as you want on this section. I'd say that making these adjustments is what takes the longest time for me. This stage is about gradually increasing the contrast, so it's better to work from midtones and gradually increase the contrast rather than start with the highlights and shadows, then work in the midtones, as it takes less time and it's much harder to perceive the subtleties if you work from extremes in contrast. This part of the painting is maybe the most challenging, but you'll find you get into the flow of it. Use the reference on the website to guide you if you like. And of course, I hadn't forgotten about the sky. Usually it makes sense to paint the sky first, but with this painting it doesn't matter so much. Carefully line around the shapes of the water at the horizon with the lightest colour. You might need to use a smaller brush for this section. Then make sure you have a transitional shade mixed between the horizon colour and the blue that will go at the top of the canvas. We'll paint this colour next. You can use a wider brush for this, then finally we'll paint the darkest blue at the top. To make the sky gradient look more realistic, get a clean soft brush and blend the colours until they look smooth. To paint the clouds, get the darker sky shade from your palette and use the edge of a brush to stipple the cloud formation. I'm using the round shape of the filbert brush to make a small wispy cirrus cloud, but you can make any formation you like. The trick here, which is what makes painting clouds like this so simple, is blending out the cloud shapes lightly with a clean soft brush. The edges of the cloud blend into the sky.
All the lovely things we plan to do today.
At this point you could call it done, but I'm going back into the water to add more highlights and reflections. I usually take a step back from my painting for a while or leave it overnight then come back to it to make some more changes. I think this is starting to look done now, so thank you so much for watching and I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a like. If you want to see more tutorials, I'm planning to make some more oil paintings, as well as drawing tutorials and soft pastel tutorials in the next weeks. I feel like I want to keep up with this ocean theme for the next few videos as I really enjoy painting seascapes like this, so hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and again, thank you so much for watching.